Hey there, Red Deer. Mayor Ken here again with you with another post-council interview. Pleased to be on board today with Deputy Mayor Kramer Barnstable. Kramer, good to see you as always. And today we're actually in it's a fairly rare spot for us to be. We're actually in one of our city facilities today. We're here at Archives today. We have Jennifer Thomas with us. Jennifer, great to see you as well today. I can't, every time I come to Archives, or anyone else I would challenge, can't help but think of Michael Dawe, and brings back so many great memories of Michael and his commitment to the city, and certainly today is no exception. You come in the door, you think about what a great custodian of Red Deer's heart for so many years, and storyteller, great counselor. Hard to believe Michael's no longer with us, but it's great to be here today for sure, Jennifer.
Wonderful. Well, it's wonderful to be able to host you both in our facility. So I'm glad you were able to join us here. And you're right about Councillor Dawe. Yeah, and he was such a proponent for sharing our community's history and preserving that history. And as we make plans, and as you make plans as council to bring us forward, it's always important to remember where we came from. And so, yeah. So it's
spoken like a true archivist, John. Really. I mean, that really puts it in perspective, Jennifer.
So, yeah, well, wonderful. And it's wonderful to be able to awesome. To host you here with us. You. Yeah. So I do have the questions prepared. And so if we're ready and you're ready, wonderful. Okay. This month in January, Council directed the recruitment of an Indigenous representative for the Housing and Homelessness Integration Committee. So wonderful. Mayor, could you elaborate on the importance of this role and how it aims to enhance the committee's work?
Well, I certainly could and should. However, Councillor Barnstable is with me, and I'm putting him on the spot a bit here because he's a member of the nomination committee, and he serves that function along with a couple of other councillors and so on. I will say this. The nominating committee has never been more busy, which is a barometer of the public's interest in joining with the city and filling committees and so on. But I'll certainly put my good colleague on the spot here. I can certainly answer it, but I think a member of the nominations committee is far more proper than me.
The mayor's testing out my level of preparedness on this one, so it's all good. No, it's I've only sat on two meetings with the nomination committee, and this is our second one. But it's been extremely valuable to see the process and how that's set up, and specifically to this Indigenous representation on the Housing and Homelessness Integration Committee. It's a valuable piece that is needed, and it was amazing to see one individual put his name forward for the committee. And not only it would have been nice to have more than one, but the one that we received was extremely qualified and had a great resume attached to it. So I know that he'll bring great insight, and that's a really important committee within our city. One with obviously the city's well aware of some of the challenges that we have, and I'm sure that individual will be a great fit, and we're happy to bring his name forward to the rest of council.
Yeah, I think that's put very, very well. There's been so many changes, particularly the province made a very major change before the new year when they, what I would say, consolidated the community-based organizations in the housing field, which included the city of Red Deer and 6 other mid-sized cities. So you also included Lethbridge, for example, plus Calgary, plus Edmonton, and so on. So the city used to be the community-based organization responsible for granting housing dollars from the province. The province has now brought that back into their own structure. So committees like HHIC, the Housing and Homelessness Integrated Committee, actually have elevated their profile in the city now, and particularly around the Indigenous section. It's such an important section, overrepresented in homelessness and so on. So this was quite a valuable appointment yesterday.
Wonderful. That's great. Thank you. Switching gears a little bit. So the traffic bylaw, and that's a new one this month as well, and it was updated. And one of the major items included was a change to school and playground zones. So they're going to start now at 7 a.m. So, Councillor, if you would, could you explain the reasoning behind this change and how it benefits the residents?
Well, I think that this is it's an important change, and for someone that in my other life, I do deal with lots of kids around that age, and what I've found out is a lot of schools begin at 8 a.m. And around that time. So I was even surprised finding that out in the last number of years that kids start so early. But obviously with school starting that time, we need to get kids to school earlier. Parents need to commute to work, and I think it's an important change that we need for our children's safety and making sure that that timeline moves now down to 7 a.m. I know it's a little bit earlier, and it's going to take some time to get some messaging across to the community, but as far as the value of our kids' safety and making sure that those speed limits are brought in a little bit earlier, I think it's something that the community should be well prepared for, and it should make a big difference in a lot of people's lives, other than just being aware of it. And anything we can do to keep our kids safe on the roads, I'm all for it. So no, it's something that was needed, and is one of the many things that we discussed within the bylaw, and it's one of those moving parts that was important for sure.
Nice, excellent. I know when I'm traveling to work and it's before 8 a.m., there's a lot of school buses and kids lined up outside. Yeah. So yeah, there's a big impact there.
Yep.
Wonderful, good. One of the other updates to our bylaw involves removing the prohibition of the use of salt on sidewalks. So, Mayor, can you just talk a little bit about what led to that decision and what residents should know about it?
It was quite a fascinating, I think, learning curve for me individually when the traffic bylaw came to us in early January, and the city manager recommended removing the provision of prohibiting salt. So there's historical context, which fits our venue today for sure. So the historical context is that bylaw, at least that section of that bylaw, had not been looked at since 1996. So you can imagine in 1996, the use of salt was far more of what I would call an environmental concern, a drainage concern into the storm system, stormwater systems, things like that, than it is today. So fast forwards, 25, 28 years or so from 1996, and you have all manner of combinations of salt, all manner of formulas for ice melt and so on. And who among us would not have a bucket of ice melt either that we bought in any retailer or in a fundraiser, Jennifer, which I'm sure you have probably participated in, most of us have. So the commonality of the product, was something that we needed to understand, the safety of the product. And as Greg Sikora, talked to council yesterday, that neighborhood concerns related to salt and pets, for example, and so on, which, Councillor Barnstable himself related a personal story about his own pets, being, very sensitive, paws get very sensitive to the chemicals and so on. And so Manager Sikora reminded us yesterday that half the problem, if you will, is that we overuse salts or we overuse ice melt or whatever. It doesn't take much. So, be sparingly, use enough, all those kinds of things. The biggest issue around it, though, and this shouldn't be too much of a mystery, is it's really unenforceable. So you have salt on a sidewalk. There's no way you can prove the homeowner did it. It might have been a well-meaning neighbor, for example. And then our manager of community policing, Mr. Ferguson, said that to even prove it's salt, which the courts need to enforce a bylaw, they would have to take a sample of the melt, if you will, get it analyzed and all those things. So, and how much resources do we put into, what's the limit for enforcement in terms of, so the real, first of all, we've had an evolution in the safety of the product. And we need education around the usage of the product, which council also spoke about. But then that comes up against the enforcement issue and so on. So city manager recommended and council agreed unanimously to say that the prohibition of salt was really no longer a useful deterrent in a bylaw for all of those reasons. We had a citizen come out. I think he did very well representing the concerns of pet owners and so forth, reminded us that there is a group of people whose pets are affected by salt on the sidewalk. And that's just a reminder in our community to be sparing about it, to be considerate about it, and all those kinds of things. However, it was just too unenforceable to be practical. I don't know if you want to comment on it at all, Kramer. I mean, you were one of those folks I think spoke very well to it.
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it on the head, Mayor, as you usually do. But the main thing I would say is just for those that use salt, I think it's important that, especially ones that maybe don't own pets, I think that we just need to get the message across to use it sparingly. There are pet owners that do worry about their animals, and me being one, having a little Brussels Griffon crossed with a pug. She scurries along the ice there, and it is tricky sometimes when homeowners use a little bit too much salt. So I think that message just needs to get across our community. Now that it's removed from the bylaw, the penalty, that doesn't mean that we can, just start using it, more aggressively than we have in the past. So I think it's important that the community knows that.
Thank you. Thank you. I also am a pet owner, so I can appreciate where you're coming from too. Yeah. So this month, Councillor Winchester brought forward a notice of motion regarding lighting and trail safety in Mountford Heights area. So Mayor Johnston, can you share more about the concerns raised and the planned improvements?
Yeah, I think Councillor Winch's motion was quite timely because this issue's been long unresolved for the residents of Montford Heights. And Montford Heights is, maybe our folks maybe don't know where Montford Heights is, but it's right on the top of Gates on the Village Mall there. It's a big condo property there overlooking an escarpment and so on. And hence the name Heights, of course. So the escarpment itself is part of our trail system. So it's quite busily walked and so on, but it has unfortunately, found itself as a bit of a location for, folks that are up to no good from time to time. Certainly folks that are vulnerable and are looking for shelter, those kinds of things. So the residents there, and I pointed out yesterday at council that 99%, I would say, if not all, of the residents of Montford Heights are seniors. They're mobile seniors, so they're not in assisted living. This is quite an active living space, and so on. So safety was the issue. It's interesting that some proponents of law enforcement will say lighting actually attracts bad behavior, and some say it deters bad behavior. And those kinds of things. So council had to make, really what I would call a fundamental decision really for the next council. We didn't decide to fund a project for this council because we've already passed the budget. So what we had said, and Councillor Wein just put this in her motion, was that the 2026 capital budget, which will be heard in November, will contain a funding line for Montford Heights. Now, will it be passed? That depends on the council of the day. But will it be included in the budget? Yes, it will. So administration will go out. They'll meet with the folks in Montford Heights, get an appreciation for what type of lighting, what the intensity of it would be, those kinds of things. And it's going to get resolved. I'll just say, that I hope that the folks from Montford Heights can close this issue in November, which is easy for me to say when I won't be voting on it. But I'm glad that it did come to council. Thank you.
Thank you. Earlier this month, Council approved amendments allowing housing suites and duplexes on a case-by-case basis. Councillor, what promoted this change, and how do you envision it impacting housing options in Red Deer?
Yeah, it's housing is really front of mind as far as this council is concerned, as far as the community is concerned, and even not just in the city of Red Deer, not just in the province of Alberta, and not just in Canada. It's North America. It's a world issue right now, and the little steps that you can make as far as adding secondary suites, I think that goes a long way in just giving options for individuals. I think last night we heard that our vacancy rate was at 1.5%.
Yes. Which
is actually, it was the last I had heard was at 0.7. So it is getting a little bit better, but still that's a staggeringly low number. And any time that we can give not only developers but homeowners options to allow more housing to individuals that are out there searching and seeking, that's a priority. And I think when it comes to just looking at how we view our city and the different proponents of how we do land use, things are changing, and the world we live in now is even different than it was 3-4 years ago, let alone 10, 15 years ago. And so we have to be a little bit flexible with that. I think the term that the city manager used and our planners have used is flexible certainty. And I think that's really valuable to what the community is looking at, is they want to know what they can expect, but we have to also be flexible and give those options and adapt to, the times that are changing quickly.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, thank you. Is there anything that you wanted to add, Mayor?
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. And I think Councillor Barnstable put it quite well. Something that we noted when this came to council was that duplexes already, there are many duplexes in the city that already have secondary suites, and they were put there before council and the community decided to bring a more of a regulatory look to secondary suites, like capping the numbers and those kinds of things, the setbacks, the parking, all that. So there were a number already in duplexes. This is not a new approach for Red Deer, but it legitimizes them now in terms of owners that are looking for opportunities either for revenue property, if you will, or the ability to now influence the choice that people have and the options. The scary part, and I really appreciate Councillor Barnstable talking about the vacancy rate. Even at 1.5, that's extreme. That simply means, out of 100 apartments in this city, not even 2 are vacant at any one time. So you can imagine that the ability to get into secondary suites is quite an option if it exists. So this will go a long way. We had an application. This is what started the process. We had an application. I'm going to say from Vanier Woods. I could be wrong, but I think it was Vanier Woods. And so now on a case-by-case, this doesn't mean we're going to blanket it out there, but on a case-by-case basis, people can apply to put secondary suites in their duplexes.
Excellent. Wonderful.
Good step forward.
Yeah, wonderful, especially when we're looking at those kind of percentages. Yeah,
oh my God, yes.
Have lots of options
for sure.
then.
Yeah, you bet.
Good. Council passed the first reading of the 2025 tax and fleet borrowing bylaws. So
that's exciting stuff.
Yeah. I had to read it slow. Let it really sink in. Councillor, can you explain the purpose of these bylaws and their anticipated impact on city operations?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, it was first reading. So as our practice with first reading, we tend to put those on the consent agenda so that we can get those approved, and then that brings it forward for second and third, which allows us to have a more fulsome discussion, fulsome debate, and the public's involved in that as well. So when it comes to this bylaw, and in particular with the tax and fleet bylaw, we're looking at just approving some of the things that we had put forward in our budget, in the capital budget, back in November that we had approved, and now we have to pass the bylaw in order to take borrowing dollars to have some of those projects and some of those items come forward. So not everything we do is extremely exciting in council. Maybe it's not something that you'd look at the council package and go, wow, I got to get there for that one. But there is requirements for us as, we're in charge of the city's finances, which is really important. And the steps that you take to make sure the finances are taken care of and looked after in an appropriate way. This is one of those steps. Not something that's extremely exciting on the agenda, I would say, but if you're someone that's into looking at what we're using for borrowing dollars, what we're using it for, specific numbers, we do have a couple of councillors that are very intrigued by those sorts of things.
Sure.
And I'm sure there's members in our public that are the same way as well. So that was the reason why it was on the agenda, and we'll come back for second and third, I believe, in 2 weeks or a month's time.
Excellent. And so does that relate to the 30, the increase in the borrowing of the 30 to the $50 million for? No, it is different.
No, that's a separate. Yeah.
That's separate. Okay, thank you, because that's a part of my next question. And so just yesterday, Council approved increasing the borrowing limit for short-term operating from $30 to $50 million.
Right.
So separate from the tax. Okay?
Yes, yeah.
And so what factors led to that decision and how that will impact the city's financial management?
A great question, and I've been around now for 12 years. So when I joined council in 2013, we had a line of credit, if you will, of just under $20 million. Now, in 2013, a couple of things were at play. Less inflation, less pressure, less cost pressure on the city. And B, and far more greater, our reserves were in much better shape, and so on. And of course, the public knows that we've taken quite a beating, if you will, in reserves these last 10, 12 years for a number of factors and so on. But it certainly became apparent to our financial services people that we needed a boost in cash flow, and that's really all an operating line is it gets you through a period when typically cash receipts to the city are low. This would be typical. January, February, March, the cash receipts to the city tend to fall off. Property taxes don't come due until June. And our receipts as it relates to recreation and so tend to be a little bit lower and so on. Parking, for example, infractions, et cetera. In wintertime, your cash flow is down. So the city's not unlike a farming industry that sells its crop once or twice a year and so on. So we really sat back and said, we could have gone with a lower limit, but we decided to go with the 50 just to, really give us a firewall for, I would say, easily the next 10 years and so on, knowing, as we talked about yesterday, Jennifer, with financial services, that any borrowing on these bylaws tend to be 3 weeks or less in duration. So we're not borrowing for a long period of time, but we are borrowing for those, payday, for example, is typical. You need to make payroll every 2 weeks, but that inflow of cash needs to be there, and when you can have something to draw it from. The alternative, and we've used this over the years, and we don't want to anymore, the alternative was taking it from our reserves, which is typically meaning we would have to redeem a market investment, a bond fund, a mutual fund, a GIC, or whatever. And so any interest that we would incur, as I said in council yesterday, was to be more than offset by the penalties it would take to redeem an investment, plus brokerage fees, plus the loss of market opportunity on that investment, and so on. So certainly sending a signal that this is just a continuation of the challenges that we have around our finances. But this sets us up to be very, very well prepared on those times when we need to dip into the line of credit. And the final thing I'll say is cities across our province now would be well advised to look at their own lines of credit in the context of natural disasters, wildfires, infrastructure breakdown. These are all the challenges that typical cities face in our province right now. The province itself will be there for us, but the immediate impacts, you can imagine if we had to evacuate a neighborhood or whatever the case may be, the immediate impacts are what the city picks up first, and then the province comes in second. So this line of credit also serves us well there.
Excellent. Thank you for that explanation. Thank you.
You got a banker, an ex-banker.
Perfect.
I'm
That
glad
was a
you
great
asked the
question
question the
for
right
you.
way. Yeah, I'll just sit over here. He's good. He's got it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Is there anything else that either of you wanted to highlight from this month's council meetings and discussions?
Oh, I was literally, as we were going through the questions, I'm like, I think we hit on every single topic or every single item that was on our agenda in the past meeting. And, I'm still a little bit younger. Mayor
I would say a lot younger, Councillor. It's all good.
But sometimes my brain gets a little bit forgetful on what we talked about 2 weeks ago. But no, I think what was highlighted was pretty much everything we discussed in our past meeting. Obviously, we had an item on our closed agenda, which can't speak about here, and for good reason. But I think that covers what we spoke about yesterday pretty well, and we got some public hearings coming up, and that's all I'll add.
We do. We have a section of council, Jennifer, called Points of Interest. And points of interest are, they could be everything from soup to nuts, for example. What has council been up to and so on. So it's a very personal item for me that I raised in council yesterday, and that is Red Deer retaining its status as the third largest city in Alberta. For any of my friends that were, if I have any friends left in Lethbridge, I'm not sure, but for any of those that were tuned into the broadcast, I certainly let them know that all of the misinformation they were sending out about they being the third largest city was completely eradicated by the Stats Can numbers and so on. So Red Deer is a third largest city in Alberta. It continues that way. It enjoys the status that falls just after Calgary, Edmonton, and then you have the greatest city in Alberta, Red Deer. And so, I just wanted to add that from council yesterday.
Wonderful. Yes, we read that news as well, and it's fantastic.
It is
Good for Red
indeed.
Deer.
Yeah, it's good on us. And there's a lesson here, Jennifer, for all those Southern Albertans that have walked around, dare I say, with their chests out and their heads maybe not in the right places. That this truly is Alberta's most wonderful and remaining third largest city. So,
Excellent.
all good.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both for this
Thank you.
afternoon. And
Thank you.
sharing all the information and the highlights. We really appreciate that.
Awesome. Well, this is Mayor Ken Red Deer saying thank you for tuning in today on behalf of Councillor Barnstable, Jennifer from our archives today. I will say this, the Red Cup reminds me that February 13th is National Heart Awareness Day for Women. Women's Heart Day is February 13th. It is a request from the organization to wear red. I was wearing red today. We shot a promo video for it. It's a big issue in this country. Women's heart health is now the biggest killer of women, if you will, than any other disease, including breast cancers and so on. It's getting more and more into the unfortunately, into the mainstream. So, Red Deer, be aware, wear red on February 13th, just a couple weeks away. And until next time, this is Mayor Ken and Councillor Barnstable saying take care, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.